The verdict was handed down yesterday against U.S. Army soldier Bradley Manning. And joining us this morning to talk about how the case compares to other cases and also what is next is a military law expert, Gary Barthel. Good morning to you, Gary.
Good morning, Alexis.
Okay, do you mind recapping for us what happened yesterday in court?
Sure. Yesterday, the military court-martials are in two phases. You have the fact-finding phase, and then you have the sentencing phase. And yesterday, the military judge came back with her findings of guilty and not guilty on the charges that PFC Manning was facing. So that phase of the trial is over.
And explain those two charges, because they're very different, yet he could end up spending the rest of his life in jail potentially.
That's correct. Right now, he's looking at a potential of 136 years of confinement. He's also looking at a dishonorable discharge. He's looking at a reduction to the lowest pay grade, and then forfeitures of his pay.
Okay, so he was found not guilty of aiding the enemy.
That's correct.
Okay.
And I think on that charge, the judge felt that the prosecution didn't meet its standard of proof, could not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he actually had knowledge that the information he was releasing was going to the enemy.
Okay, but what was he found guilty of?
He was found guilty of violating several orders that prohibited him from accessing classified information. He was also found guilty of using the computers that he had access to in a way to access that confidential information. He was also accused and found guilty of taking that information, stealing that government information, and then found guilty of disseminating that information.
Are you surprised by the verdicts?
Not at all. I think the judge made the right finding.
Okay, so the sentencing phase begins today. What can we expect? You said they're calling several witnesses, so it might be a few days.
Yeah, on the sentencing phase, unlike civilian criminal trials, in a court-martial, the sentencing phase, both parties have an opportunity to present evidence. It's an adversarial hearing. So the prosecution will submit evidence to the court that they feel is aggravating, and they're going to seek the maximum punishment possible. So I anticipate the government's going to present evidence as to how his leaks have damaged U.S. intelligence, military operations, and have jeopardized our national defense and security.
So how does this case compare to other recent leaks, like Edward Snowden, for example?
Well, with regard to the Snowden case, that's obviously a civilian trial, or will be a civilian case trial if it comes to that.
Yeah.
But in both of these cases, you have government employees. In Manning's case, a military service member who had access to intelligence. In Snowden's case, you had somebody who worked for a government agency who had access to intelligence. And for whatever reason, for their own personal feelings with regard to what the U.S. was doing, they took it upon themselves to access that information, that classified information, and release it to the public or to other sources. There's other avenues available to people who are in their situations where, you know, if they feel that there's something that's not right, they could utilize their chain of command, either in the government agency they're working in or in the military. Or
instead of saying going to Julian Assange or WikiLeaks.
Right, taking it upon themselves and releasing this classified information.
Okay, so you expect the sentencing phase will be done maybe within a week or so?
It could be done as early as the end of this week.
Okay.
My understanding is that the defense is planning on calling 21 witnesses, but the prosecution's got to put their case on first. Once they're done, then the defense will put on their case. The defense case is going to focus on extenuation mitigation. They're going to try and humanize Manning. They're going to push the theory that they've been pushing throughout the trial, and that's he never intended to harm anybody.
Sure.
Once the government's done with their case, Manning will present his case, then both sides will argue as to what they feel the appropriate punishment is, and then the judge will decide.
Okay, we'll wait to see when that happens. Gary, thanks so much for coming in and breaking it down for us today.
Thank you, Alexis.
Appreciate it.